Good evening and welcome to the Kenmore-Tonawanda Union Free School District Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, April 7th, 2020. Please be advised, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with Executive Order 202.1, members of the public will not be permitted to attend the board meeting in person, and members of the Board of Education will attend the meeting remotely via Zoom conference. The meeting can be viewed via live stream. In addition, the meeting will be recorded and transcribed at a later date. Okay, District Clerk, please note that all board members are present. I'd like a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing employment and performance of a particular individual as well as lawsuit.
So moved.
So moved by Andrew, second by Michelle. Any discussion? There being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Any opposed? Okay, motion carried unanimously. Okay, please enter breakout room 1 and we will start executive session. Good evening and welcome to the Kenmore-Tonawanda Union Free School District Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, April 7th, 2020. We are now back in public session. Again, District Clerk, please note that all trustees are present. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, that's a first. Okay. Okay, board members, you can actually unmute yours because I'll need to have firsts and seconds for these, and then we'll just mute ourselves for the presentation. So may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
So moved by Matt, second by Andrew. Any discussion? There being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. Okay, item 4B, approval of the minutes for March 10th, 2020 regular Board of Education meeting. Motion to approve.
So moved. So moved.
So moved by first by Michelle, second by Matt. Any discussion? All those in favor so signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Okay, board members, if you can go ahead and mute your end, and we'll let John do the presentation for the 2021 budget update.
Okay, thank you. Let me just share the presentation. All right, can everyone see that? Okay. So obviously we're not going to be adopting the budget tonight, but what we will be doing is at least presenting an update on the 2021 budget. Due to the coronavirus COVID-19 outbreak, a lot of the attention, if not all of the attention, has shifted over to the priority in getting medical professionals out there and really dealing with this pandemic. So in terms of the budget and how the state has reacted, it's kind of been on the back burner, understandably. So we've been really waiting for the governor to come out with a follow-up to the executive budget and then the legislature to follow up with that. So tonight we'll be going over what the New York State has adopted and what that really means for public education and Kenton specifically for next year. Here's just kind of a update on our timeline. It's been kind of derailed a little bit. We canceled our March 24th meeting, and here we are where we were supposed to do a budget adoption. However, we're just doing a budget update, and then we have yet to set our dates for the budget hearing and the budget vote. So here's an update. So the state released their budgets on April 1st. It was on time. However, we've received recent clarification that the budget vote and election timelines have now been pushed to earliest of June 1st. That doesn't mean that we have to hold our election or the vote June 1st. It's just that is the earliest that we are permitted to do so. Some districts have talked about combining that with the primary, which I believe is June 23rd. So we may look to do that if the board sees fit. The only risk that we do run with that is in the off chance that the budget for next year is defeated, we wouldn't really have any time for a budget revote in time for the July 1 start date. So that's something we need to consider. Thankfully, the Kenton community has been incredibly supportive in the past, so I don't know that we would run too much of a risk with that timeline. A couple highlights.
And I'm sorry, can I just ask a question real quick while
Yeah.
we're on? So the state's leaving that up to individual districts to decide? So potentially districts all across New York State could have different budget and election dates?
From what I've heard so far, there's still clarification that needs to come out from the state. It's just that all we know right now is that June 1st is the earliest. There really isn't any other guidance that I've seen yet in terms of mandating when that adoption election date is. But I know in at least the circle of business officials, we were looking at maybe June 23rd as a viable date, so we don't have people coming out multiple times to vote. But that we're still waiting on guidance for that.
Okay, my follow-up question to that then would also be, have we gotten any guidance about petitions? Actually, this might be more of a question for Gina. Questions for petitions or people who are running, because obviously those petitions are supposed to be turned in, but they're not allowed to petition. So how do we know who ends up on the ballot? Have they talked about what the process for that is?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say because everything's backed up from the date of the budget vote. So let's just theoretically say that June 23rd is the day we're going to hold the election and the vote. Everything that we typically would have done in May is backed up from that date. Gina, I don't know if you've heard anything more.
No, we haven't had any new timelines or any further guidance yet. So we're just.
Okay. I haven't from NISBA or NICE any either, but I was just wondering if you, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, so a few highlights from the budget. I guess it depends how you want to look at this. The economy hasn't been performing, obviously, because of the stay-at-home measures and the quarantine measures that have been put in place. So, foundation aid has been frozen at current 2019-20 levels. I guess in the grand scheme of things, that's better than them being reduced. So I guess we'll take what we can get. So the foundation aid that we are currently operating under is going to be the same moving forward. There's a pandemic adjustment that I'll get into on the next slide that is eerily similar to a gap elimination adjustment modification to our state aid runs. And that is a total of $1.8 million for us. I believe the total is $1.1 billion statewide. And that's equal to the federal stimulus amount or the CARES Act that was recently enacted by the Trump administration. So what's the impact on Kenton? So let's not even talk about the 1.8 pandemic adjustments, but when we look at state aid being frozen at current levels and all the other aids, categorical aids playing out, we're looking at a net reduction of $350,000 from where we last were when we presented our first draft of the budget. I will say, thankfully, what has happened in light of this budget kind of being pushed through is that all of those categorical aid propositions from the governor, combining those transportation building aids all into foundation aid, that was all rejected and thrown out by the legislature. So that's good for us, good for school districts statewide. The new building aid tier was rejected. So really all of those other ancillary propositions that came through in the executive budget have effectively been rejected. So there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding the pandemic reduction or that federal stimulus in terms of the CARES Act. And why I say that is, that $1.8 million is allegedly the equivalent in terms of what Kenton is entitled to through this additional stimulus funding from the federal government. We haven't seen really the formula, how that number shakes out, but from what we understand, it is funded and flowed to us through title money. So our title funding is in a separate fund than our general fund, but there hasn't been any kind of explanation in terms of how we can intake this expected revenue to offset this reduction. So when you look at the state aid runs, if you remember in the gap elimination adjustment era, you would have your entire list of aid amounts, your categorical aids, building aid, and then there would be a negative GEA. That's how it shows up in the state aid runs, but it just says pandemic adjustment. We're unclear where that's coming from, where it's going to be reduced. So we look throughout the fiscal year for certain cash flow items. Our BOCES aid comes through at certain times of the year. So we're uncertain as to whether or not where that aid is going to be reduced by. So we're still waiting on guidance for that. Given everything with the new state aid runs that have come out, we're looking at a net gap of $1.3 million in our proposed budget. So that's something that, you know, we weren't prepared to propose a balanced budget. And frankly, the timing right now wouldn't be ideal, because another piece of the budget that was adopted at the state level is that it authorizes the division of budget to make periodic adjustments based on revenue. And the first window is April 1st through April 30th of this year, because remember, the New York State budget is April 1 to March 31, and unlike us, where we're July 1 to June 30. So the state, in its current operating budget, is looking at potentially reducing state aid after a look back of this month. So it's good in a sense that we're not looking to adopt a budget, because it would be difficult for us to adopt a budget now just to find out later that state aid is then going to be reduced. So we'll look hopefully in mid-late May to adopt a budget with a clearer picture, because then the next window is, I believe, in the month of May, and then it goes from a July to a December window. So there's 3 windows that the state's going to use to determine whether or not they're going to reduce school aid. So what does that mean for us locally? We really have, as I've said in multiple presentations before, it's either increasing our revenues or reducing our expenditures. And unfortunately, we aren't in a position to levy anymore or look for any additional revenue. So our team has been diligent in looking at other ways to reduce expenditures in our budget for next year. We're also looking at possible additional fund balance appropriations. You know, we've been building up our fund balance pretty aggressively, and you know, thankfully we've been in a position to do so. And it's times like these where we may need to lean on our reserves to get us through a year or two. And then we're keeping our eye on sales tax revenue. You know, Erie County has sent out notices to all Erie County districts on potential reductions. So we've been under budget in our revenue for sales tax, so we're pretty comfortable where we're at, but that's something we're going to have to monitor as we move forward. Okay. So here's just kind of a recap of our state aid, a comparison over the years. You've seen this slide before, but you know, this one's a little different now, because you can see that between 2019-20 and 2020-21, it looks like there's a reduction, and that's including that $1.8 million pandemic adjustment, only because we're unclear how that federal money is going to come to us. So our net aid for next year is actually going down slightly. So what are we doing moving forward now that we have the state? Moving forward? So we're looking at the COVID-19 impact. I mean, that's something that has hit the country in the world, frankly, and then we're trying to kind of localize that impact here. You know, we've been working around the clock to make sure that our students are being fed, and that our food service staff has been absolutely fantastic in keeping the operation going. But there's added costs to that. There's added cost to sanitation. You know, we're looking at a potential FEMA relief fund that we could tap into. We're also looking at staffing. This is, you know, it's a tough time to build a budget. It's a tough time to staff our schools, and this is something we're reviewing on a daily basis. Same goes with programming. You know, Kenton offers a lot of programs, but unfortunately in the state of where we are budgetarily, it's something that we're looking at every program. And then we're focusing on the budget gap. I mean, that's really statutorily, we have to adopt a budget that is balanced, and right now we don't have one. So this is something that we're going to focus on moving forward. And then monitor and update fund balance projections, something we do every year, no different than years prior, but it's even more important this year to see where we're going to end up at the end of this fiscal year so we can better plan and potentially appropriate more of our reserves for next year. And then we may be in a position where we recommend to the board to exceed that 4% unappropriated fund balance limit. So right now we've been maintaining our unappropriated fund balance at 4%. However, we've had conversations, we've been to webinars. No one wants to say, yeah, go for it, but no one's saying not do it. Because I think it can be justified because there's so much uncertainty next year in terms of revenue. Now would be an opportune time to fund our unappropriated fund balance in excess of that 4%. We've been fortunate enough to maintain 4%, but if at the end of the year we have extra funding, we may need to recommend an additional appropriation to our unappropriated fund balance in order to kind of push us through for the next year. Other than that, that's kind of a recap of where we're at budgetarily. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
John, that I definitely would support exceeding that 4% unappropriated fund balance, especially if, are we thinking we might use that to offset some layoffs? I mean, when we're talking about staffing review, I mean, that's what we're really talking about, right, is people losing their jobs.
Yeah, anytime we look to tap into our reserves, and it's not directly correlated to a specific expenditure. And what I mean by that is, we have an ERS and a TRS reserve. If we're not looking to appropriate those specific reserves, then yes, we would want to try and offset any kind of reduction in staffing and or programming.
And we also extended the deadline for retirement notification, correct?
We're working with the KTA on that. It's not necessarily official, but anything that we can do to offset layoffs or program reduction, we're looking for.
Well, and quite honestly, certainly not speaking on behalf of anybody, this year might have done some people in, somebody who thought they might have had another year left in them with all this that's happening. They might not think that another year is good, so.
Right.
Any other questions from anybody else? No? Okay, John, thank you so much for the update. I guess we'll just keep our eye on that pandemic adjustment. I have a feeling that that's probably going to give me a lot of work through ECAS Bay next year. I'm going to get.
Yeah, it's more of the same. These ideas come out and there's just really no explanation or mechanics behind them. So it kind of leaves us guessing as to how we're going to operate.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, so we probably don't have any board reports, right? Nobody has been attending any meetings that we know of. I doubt it.
We did have a staff development policy board meeting. We did it
okay, yeah,
online the other day, basically to review the course offerings for the summer, and encouraging a lot of presenters to try and move their courses online. And the policy board really has taken a hard look at the rigor of the online courses and the amount of participation that the presenters are, or the amount of involvement that the presenters have, and making sure that meets the number of hours that they're offering. That was basically what went on.
Okay. Very good. Anybody else have any online meetings? No? Okay. Then we'll move on to our board comments. Gina, we need to talk about that BOCES vote. So do you want to bring up what we need to be discussing?
Yes.
Stuff at item 6B, the BOCES vote. Gina, did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Every year the BOCES, we have to vote on the BOCES budget and on their board candidates. So the vote this year is April 21st. We normally do that meeting like 7 or 7:30 in the morning. We just need to decide on a time. It's just a couple minutes long, but it's something that we have to take care of.
All right, let me just pull up my calendar here. So the 21st is a Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, I work at the food pantry on Tuesdays. I'm in the mornings, but I mean, I'm pretty free. I could do before that or after that. Is everybody okay with a like a 7:30 or 8 o'clock meeting? I know we did that early because people had to go to work. So,
Right. And so if we can do it at night at a regular time because everybody's kind of just home, or we could do it earlier. I don't know what works for everyone.
okay. What's everybody's preference?
Anytime works for me.
Okay.
Anytime's good for me.
Tom and Andrew, do you have any? Tom, I don't know if you're taking the semester off, right? So, but I don't know if you have plans. Maybe you have something to watch on TV. I don't know. All right. So then why don't we? Yeah, we can say the evening then. You want to just do 6 o'clock or
What was the date again?
April 21st? That's a Tuesday.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Want to do the evening like 6 o'clock or 6:30, whatever works better for people. Okay.
Whichever.
All right.
No preference.
Let's say 6 o'clock then on the 21st, 6 p.m.
Okay.
And John, you'll set that meeting up for us?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And we'll do the same thing. We'll stream it. Okay. Anything else that needs to be brought up before we move on to the superintendent search? So I'm not sure if the rest of the board has been fielding a lot of questions about the superintendent search and what, our steps are, what's going to happen. Normally, I'd start by asking for input, but I thought actually this time I'd make a recommendation to the board and then get feedback on that so that we can discuss this publicly where we are. First and foremost, I think it is really this board's responsibility to hire the next superintendent. I think it would be a travesty, honestly, to push this off to the next board, especially since there are going to be 2 open seats. The process would have to start all over from scratch because it would be disingenuous to the process to have other people do the finalist interviews that weren't part of the initial interviews. What I'd like to recommend to the board is that we just try to remain patient with the process that we've already established and try to keep that the same, recognizing that the composition of our community groups may end up changing. If some people who originally said they would participate may not, there might be some changing out. We could talk to Lynn about that instead of putting new people in, maybe just keeping whoever can stay. My thought is, I know the superintendent would have to give notice, whoever the successful candidate is, would have to give notice. So early June, we would have to make a decision. And I feel, certainly I don't have evidence for this, or I'm not in the governor's head, but I feel like as soon as the apex of this happens and there's this period of time where people are getting better and they're recovering, they'll start reinstituting these face-to-face meetings, and I think that group would be within the confines. We could still practice social distancing. We could be in a larger space. Some people have asked me about recording the meetings, and we really can't, or recording the interviews, doing something like this, we can't. We really have to protect the privacy of those superintendent finalists' interviews and the questions that are asked, and you really can't, with the volume of people that are involved in those community groups, you can't ensure that everything would remain confidential. So I want to preserve the process. So my recommendation to the board is that we keep the same idea moving forward, that we will have the 3 finalists. Again, we'll ask Dr. Fusco to reach out to each of the finalists to see if they're even still interested in the position, considering that obviously the next school year is going to look very different, not only in Kenton, but for many schools, maybe somebody isn't interested in being a superintendent anymore. But that this board would preserve that process where we still have the community groups interviewing, and then we would conduct the final interviews of the candidates. If for some reason we are still under heavy restrictions for face-to-face meetings, then I would make the recommendation that we eliminate the community groups only if absolutely necessary, and the board would conduct the final interviews and make a decision on its own, but only if by early June there isn't a loosening of the group meetings, which I have to believe there will be by then. As I said, I mean, you can still get together in small necessary groups, but I think by June, we should be able to keep the process the same. So I'd like some feedback from the board if we're all thinking that. But again, I do not believe this should fall to the next board. I think it's our responsibility as elected members of our community that we preserve the process that we've said we did here too. So, but I welcome any feedback from the board.
I 100%
I guess
agree. Go ahead, Andrew.
I guess I'd say ideally we would do this in person, and if we can do that in June, then I'd say then let's hold off until then, as long as we feel like we can complete the process before the new board is assembled. So I would say let's put sort of a stake in the ground in terms of the dates that we're hoping to do this and get things scheduled, and hope that by then we're in a place where we can meet in person. But if we get to the beginning of June and things are still locked down, I would say we should probably plan on trying to move forward with some non-in-person interviews and see if we can do it that way. I guess that's the balancing act, right? Is if we get to June and we're still locked down, what's more important, this board having some background in the process and picking the superintendent, or being able to do this in person? For me, it would be the former more so than the latter, but I'm open to other people's opinions.
Yeah, I guess I think my hesitancy in running any kind of interview where, let's say, like we have an executive session. I trust that we're a small group and everybody understand. We're sworn actually by laws of confidentiality. You know, if you have 10 different students in a room, you know, on various like Zoom cameras, you've got then 10 different parents, you've got 10 different teachers, you've got 10 different support staff, you got 10 community members. You're really looking at 50 people, like, and if one person records or there's somebody standing outside of the door during the interview process, I think that risks the entire process. So I'm hoping that I would support those community interviews if they can be done face to face. I'm not comfortable with them being done online. But if the rest of the board said, no, I think it would be okay, I certainly would go with the majority. I just feel like there's just too much room for, and then you're talking about those same 50 people doing 3 different interviews. So, you know, you've got 150 potential chances for error. I don't know. That makes me nervous. Maybe I'm overreacting. Any other input from anybody?
I would agree with you.
With just trying to keep the
Oh, yeah. Keep the process on for June. This board should be the one that selected. You know, worst case scenario, all 3 of them decide that they're no longer interested, and then we're starting the process over with a new board, which is not a good plan.
You froze out there, Michelle. Can you just repeat what you said?
Oh, I froze up. I said the worst case scenario, Lynn reaches out to all 3 candidates and all 3 are no longer interested.
Oh yeah, that would be bad.
But then, you know, you're looking at an interim and appointing an interim and starting the process over with the next board. So, I mean, there would be no other choice at that point. But for now, you know, I think that should things start relaxing in June, we should be able to keep on with the process that we have and with whatever community members are still willing to participate. And if we are still locked down, then I agree that you can't guarantee the privacy in all those homes for all those Zoom meetings, for all those interviews. And it might be, depending on where we are, a good idea to just not have those community meetings if we get to that point.
Okay. Can I toss another fireball out just because I'd like to just hear some feedback from the board? What if 2 of the candidates say they are not interested and we wind up with one that is one of our finalists? Would we continue still with the original process, get the feedback and say, yeah, everybody agrees this person's good, we're going to keep them? Or do we say we're going to start all over again?
Even if we wind up with only one candidate, I would like to continue on with the process. There's a reason we're looking to gain more information, whether or not there's 3 candidates or 1 candidate. And if we can still have the community groups be part of this and they weigh in, then we're looking at, are we selecting this person or are we starting the process over because they didn't, they didn't reach that bar for everybody. I would still like to continue with the process even with only 1.
Okay.
I agree with Michelle. I think all the information we can possibly get, we need to get. And I think as long as we can stick with this process, let's stay with it as long as we can.
Okay. It may be a moot point because by next month we might have more guidance that we're allowed to, meet in those small groups. And then in that case, we would just reach back out to those constituent groups and say who's still interested in participating. And as long as we had a significant number returning, then, maybe we just keep it the same. Tom, did you have some feedback? Oh, you're muted. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. There
Can
we
you
go.
hear me now?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think we should just, proceed for now with the process and see where it takes us. It'd be ideal, to have the constituent groups weigh in. We really need that feedback, but I think the Zoom kind of thing would be nightmarish, as we said, with the privacy issues.
Yeah. So to Andrew's point, I'm looking at my calendar here. Would we want to say, so our original goal is to have the interviews and then have the weekend to sort of like marinate in our brain and then meet for that following Monday to discuss as a group. Would we want then those finalist interviews by the community groups and ours to take place that first week in June? So June 1st is a Monday. So then we could meet and decide as a board on June 8th at the latest. And then that would give the potential candidate basically 3 weeks, if they were notified, that they would have about 2.5, 3 weeks to give their job notice that they were leaving. Is that, Steve, I don't know if you can hear me, but in your opinion, like human resources opinion, is that enough time? 3 weeks to give?
Usually for a superintendent candidacy, it's a little longer, but considering the crisis and all these tight deadlines, I think most districts would be willing to relinquish somebody.
Okay. Okay. All right. So does that timeline seem amenable to the board then, that we would plan on conducting? I think if we establish that timeline now, we could revisit to move it earlier. Like, we're not making it official that we're notifying the community groups, but in our head, that would be like the latest that we could do is to conduct those interviews that first week of June. And then we would convene as a group to make the final decision the 8th. And that would be the latest for us. Does that sound good?
Sounds good, yes.
Okay. All right.
I like that plan.
Okay, we could do earlier. I just like Andrew said, let's put the goalpost in, and that would be the latest. So I'll talk to Lynn. I'll reach out to her, have her reach out to the candidates, see who's still interested. And then if there's any changes to that, of course, I'll notify the board, and then we'll put her on notice about that latest potential timeline, depending on what happens. Maybe things will get done earlier, and that'll be good. So, okay. All right. Any other comments about the superintendent search?
Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, we need access to our binders too at some point. You could
Sure.
mention that, Lynn, please. I don't
Sure.
know how that happened, but
Yeah. Once we're taking a look at the finalists, or
right.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
She would be. So at that meeting on the 8th, where we're discussing the finalists, my understanding is she will not be in the room with us, but because if we want to have those materials, she will probably have to wait outside of the room. I can shore that up with her and ask her, make sure I get clarification on that.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Okay, anything else about the super search? All right. Lucas. How you doing, Lucas? Oh my goodness. This is
I'm
kind of
good.
a crazy time, right?
Yeah, for sure.
How are you doing? You holding up all
Uh,
right?
yeah, everything's pretty good. I have a larger family. I have like 3 other siblings, so I'm staying occupied and stuff. So it's not like
Yeah, yeah,
not really.
okay. And how do your classmates seem to be handling? Are you guys doing like,
Yeah,
FaceTime or?
yeah, I mean, I have like Zoom meetings every week, so I get to see other people.
Huh.
And I know, like, obviously, all people in my class were pretty bummed about, all the stuff going on because it's our senior year. But like for the most part, we're pretty much like staying connected. And yeah, I mean, I haven't heard any complaints about like the actual classes. Like as far as I know, me and all of my classmates, we are getting like the work and stuff and being able to do it. And there's really no lack of communication between the students and the teachers. So everything like that's good. And obviously through social media, we've been able to still communicate and stuff. So it's pretty convenient that way.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Well, I know that a lot of districts are beginning to have conversations about alternate celebrations since there won't be prom, there won't be graduation probably. I would assume they haven't announced that, but as these restrictions are lessened, they're probably not going to jump to allowing hundreds of people. I know at the community college they did cancel graduation. So if you start hearing any input from students about alternative plans that they're hearing from other places or would like us to consider, please give us that feedback.
Okay.
We'll be obviously under restriction from the government, but we'd love to try to celebrate, the students as much as we can. So.
Mhm. I know there's been one weird idea that my mom brought up to me, and it was that like this is just like a random thing, not anything really serious. But she said that she saw an idea on her Facebook that you would have the graduation, but have it at like a drive-in, and then have all the families come and drive in their cars, and then you put it up on the large like screen for the drive-in, and you do it like that was just it was just like a joke Facebook.
Well, you know
That's
what we should do? We
reminded
should
me of
talk to
that.
Joe Eminger about shutting down Delaware like they do for the parade and let people have a drive-through graduation ceremony or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, let's keep that conversation open. So anything to report on your end besides your classes and stuff like that?
No,
No?
not really.
All righty. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, Steve-O, your turn. Superintendent update.
Good evening. I asked each of the assistant superintendents to talk a little bit tonight about what they're doing, because in addition to dealing with this crisis, we also have to deal with the regular running of the district and planning for next week or next year. So they're doing a lot of double duty. So I asked them to address that. But I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our staff for their quick mobilization on many fronts in an effort to serve our community. They've been nothing short of phenomenal. I think people have seen that in our weekly updates, and I just can't say enough about our staff. I'm very proud of what they've been doing. Obviously, we're in uncharted waters where information and changes are coming at us rapidly. Today, we received guidance from the state dealing with the cancellation of regents and some graduation requirements. We're looking those over, and once we study those documents, share them with our staff, we will certainly share them with the community, and we'll provide some additional details. I can say, though, that the guidance offers a great deal of flexibility for our students, so that's good. The question we don't have an answer for yet is when schools will reopen. Currently, the closure takes us through the end of April. Based on all that what we hear on the media from our leaders, our medical professionals, it's just necessary and an incumbent on us to plan for an extended closing beyond April. So we're in the process of doing that. I really feel for our students who are missing out on the many activities that accompany their educational studies. The list of things we've canceled, from sporting events, field trips, extracurriculars, is just staggering, and it's a shame, but we're gonna have to work through it. I know it creates a great deal of stress. I want the community to know that we are doing our best and we learn and adapt with each passing week. Right now, we need everybody to focus on staying safe and staying home to halt the spread of this virus. To our students, I would say we are here to support you in any way you need us. Please reach out to your teachers or administrators and we will assist. Seniors, please keep up with your work, stay in touch with your teachers. We want you to graduate on time. To our families, I would say we understand how stressful this can be. Please feel free to contact your child's principal if you have any questions or concerns, or if we can help you in any way. We will get through this. We'll do it together. We're a resilient bunch, and I think I can say that Kenton pride has never been stronger. And that concludes my report. Any questions? No questions, then I will turn it over to, looking at who's next?
Kelly White. Maybe we all need our Kenton Pride t-shirts to wear to the next meeting, maybe.
Sounds like a good idea. Kelly White, you're on.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. It's a tough act to follow. Thanks, Steve. Just to kind of give you a little background of what's happening in the instructional world, when we last were together as a whole group, it was a Friday, and we fully anticipated that we would be working through at least the middle of the following week. And it wasn't until over the weekend that we realized that we weren't going to be working through the middle of the following week. So on Sunday, myself and the directors, we worked really hard on developing a plan for Monday to develop as many resources as we could and a plan for our families for the closure. The plan at that time, was really to reinforce skills, really to make sure that we were giving kids things that they could work on independently. And while we knew that the closure would be for a few weeks, we figured in spring break into that equation. So we figured we'd have resources that we could share for a few weeks and keep everybody going. When the staff joined us on Monday, our goal for the day was to make connections with as many families as possible that day to know where our channels were, that we could reach our families and get information to them. And our teachers did a phenomenal job on that day. It was really exciting to see a lot of people collaborating, learning new technology, really connecting with our kids in new ways. And we were really excited about that. The relationship with your students is different when it's online. When your kids are relaxed and at home in their living rooms and they're seeing their teacher on the screen, that's a very different relationship than the one that you have in the classroom. And we really wanted to capitalize on this opportunity to change that. Little did we know it was going to be longer than that. So it was within the first week, we were really chasing our tails, trying to get some guidance out to our teachers and our families. So with everything, you start a project, it takes probably a couple days to gather feedback, make refinements. By the time you get it in a good place, things have changed. So that's pretty much how things go. We got some guidance out by Friday. It wasn't really very monumental, but it was an acknowledgement of the position that we were in and that we would be working as best as we could to keep up with everything. We continue to provide communication and guidance. Since that time, the reality has become clear that the closure is really undetermined. We don't know how long we're going to be out. So within another few days, we started working on a plan in the event that we close beyond April 20th. We are now in a position where we started releasing that plan to our teachers so that they can start transitioning to the plan that we will be closed beyond April 20th. And now that we are planning to instruct during the spring break week, that's another week of instruction that we originally were not counting in the original guidance. So the next plan is really more about streamlining technology, trying to reduce the volume of work for our families, separating resources from assignments and things that we would like completed, and just trying to really rein this in, provide some predictability as to when you may see resources and or may be able to connect with your teachers, And we're really hoping that we will be able to bring this together a little bit better. In the meantime, now we have some new guidance, as Steve spoke of, and I'm sure you all know about, with the Regents exam cancellation. So we have additional things to factor in to grading procedures and all these other things that teachers are talking about. We're making some adjustments at the middle school and elementary levels. The high school, it's a little more complicated because with the state continually releasing guidance, and while what they shared today was certainly helpful, there are still a lot of unanswered questions. You know, what do we do with local finals? How do we determine whether or not students have reached mastery on the priorities of the course? What does the grading process look like for GPA calculations, and how is that going to impact post-secondary applications and the long-term ramifications of those things? So at this point, we're really trying to hold steady, and continue with our current practice to the extent possible, and we will make a decision after we get as much guidance as we can from the state. So we're just going to keep going forward as best we can, and then we have the flexibility that at the end of the day we can look and go, well, we don't have enough grades, and so we might adopt this process, or this went really well and we'll stick with it, or maybe for this group of courses or this department, things are not quite that simple, so we may need to make some adjustments for this place but not this place. So rather than making a decision now and then something crazy could change and we could be back in school tomorrow, but we've already made a decision to go this way, and now it prevents us from returning to normalcy tomorrow. So we're kind of navigating the waters. We're just asking everybody to be patient as we're being patient with the state as they roll out guidance. So there's just been a lot of reactive work from the instructional perspective. All the while, we're excited about this being a catalyst to changing the way that we teach. We're doing some visioning for 2021, taking a look at how is this going to transform what we do in the future, what are professional needs, how do we continue the momentum of so much of this digital work that we've been doing, and how do we make this time for our teachers and our students a real investment in their learning and their futures. So we are using it to get excited about what's to come. So that's kind of a recap. My executive summary just includes a few items on the consensus agenda. Were there any questions? No? Okay, well that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Well said. Assistant Superintendent Mercado.
Covered a lot of kind of what we've been dealing with in the presentation. These budgeting times are challenging, and we're doing the best we can to kind of move forward and prioritize any kind of staffing and programming decisions. But I do have to give a shout out and kudos to our food service department, buildings and grounds, and tech, transportation. They've all really have pulled together to make sure that the learning doesn't stop and that we're feeding our students, and they've really been part of the success in getting us moving and making sure that we're getting those resources out there to our students. So other than that, we're working through our budget challenges that we covered in the presentation. Like I said, it's good that we're not adopting a budget tonight because there are those quarterly revenue modifications that the governor and the division of budget can make. So hopefully we'll have a clearer picture. Hopefully it'll be a picture that's a little more positive in the next month when we look to adopt a budget. But between now and then, we'll be working diligently to really put a budget together that we can present to the voters for next year.
Thanks, John.
Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Mr. Richard.
Good evening, everyone. A lot of what we do this time of year is predicated on retirements, and we did get a number, as you know. We did send out a feeler to the KTA in light of the budget. We would have sent that out anyway because after spring break, sometimes people do have a change of heart, and we're pretty human about that, and we understand. But, so we're keeping an eye open on any new potential prospective retirements for next year. That impacts transfer, and so we plan on transfer running kind of like this. When we get to that point, that's a very important event for teachers. So we want to make sure that we execute that. We've moved the dates a little bit around the next board meeting where we can make some better decisions as we work with everybody collaboratively to identify some staffing needs and areas in which we're going to staff. I do share the same exact concerns for interviewing. Mr. Shamara has spent a lot of time, as well as Superintendent Bavino, on the policy board, the mentor policy board, and this year's mentors lauded our hiring that we did this year, and a lot of that had to do with not only the typical collaborative process, but that other step of going back to doing interviews with lessons. And that lesson piece is so critical because we don't want good interviewers here. We really want good teachers. And it really did, from every building I heard last year, positive feedback on going through that extra step, although it's very time consuming. So I have concerns about confidentiality we're working through. Patrick Moses and I are going to prepare protocols. We have been working with people across the state in a listserv capacity to identify those areas where we can really look to be efficient and still maintain integrity. We're probably going to use Google Forms so that one person oversees that data, and then work through with the confidentiality, non-disclosure agreements, rework those a little bit to say a little more about cybersecurity. We don't have any control. If you didn't see me a minute ago, my son had walked up and was talking and making noise, and we don't have that control during the interview process that we usually do. So I do share the exact same concerns top to bottom on the interview process this year. We do have about 30 full-timers we're going to be replacing. That's a lot of interviewing and a lot of prospective lessons. So I'm hoping as well in June that we get lightened up where we can at least bring people in to maybe do some mock lessons with adults, if we get to that point. So those are kind of the big ones. Tenure is another one. Tenure, the 3012D requires, those APPR scores require the assessment composite score in addition to the Regents exam. So because that's tied into law, it's statutory, we have to wait to see what the governor decides to do with that. So I think we'll have an answer in time for a typical tenure recommendation, but I don't know for sure. So we're hoping that they'll be able to work through those details. We continue to get, we also are going to be extending probation during this pause time for civil service employees. That's within the civil service, Erie County civil service rules anyway. They're not working, so we can't actually evaluate them. So we'll be extending that by the length of pause only. The state just came out today. Superintendent Provino sent me a notification from Harris Beach about another paid leave requirement that we're going to be grappling with. It's so new, I haven't even had time to consult with an attorney yet. I'm working with BOCES on understanding what the implications are going to be for that. Does that mean additional time allotted to staff members or not? That's not the COVID illness. That's actually sick leave balances. Like, we already have those contractually. So I don't know what the implications for that are going to be. So really that's it in a nutshell, all the things we're looking at in HR. The food service has been tremendous. I have to say, I've made a number of visits, and everyone is always smiling. It's been really impressive to see everybody step up, and I'm proud to be part of Kenton. So that wraps up my report for tonight.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, everybody. Great teamwork, I have to say. At this point, I recommend the consensus agenda for the board's approval.
Okay, any requests to withdraw specific items from consensus? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the consensus agenda as presented?
So moved.
So moved by Andrew, second.
Second.
Michelle.
Second.
Okay, I think I got Michelle first. Any discussion? There being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify with aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. Any other items that need to be brought from the board? Okay, we already had an executive session, so no need to move to executive session. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Tom. Second
Second.
by Andrew. All those in favor so signify with aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your hard work.